So hello and welcome to the Safe Wellbeing Podcast with me, Katie, and I am delighted today to be joined by Helen Wathall of, is it Wathall Funeral Directors? Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
So Helen, just first of all, tell us who you are, what your role within the industry is, for people that not as well as me or others might know you.
Yeah, well, I'm so as you said, I'm Helen Wathall. I'm the fifth generation of GE Wathall and Son funeral directors in Derby. I followed my father into the business in 1985, she says quietly, to help him out for a couple of years, and here I am. During my working career, I have been president of SAFE. I joined SAFE to get some support when my dad died in 1995, and 2002 I was president, so that went well. And I've sort of had lots of roles, I think, over the years within the profession outside of the day-to-day stuff as well.
I definitely know that. Yep. And we're coming on to, talk today of a slightly different angle that's maybe not so much spoken about in different ways of looking at things. And, during COVID, 4 years ago now, we're in 2024, you embarked on a challenge of, no alcohol for a certain amount of time. And 4 years later, you're still, as you put it to me when we had a chat, alcohol free. So why did you make that decision? And why was it important for you as Helen just to continue on that journey?
Yeah, so I when COVID hit, I was after a lot of shenanigans at work, I was sent home to be the person who would go back into work should we get a case in the office, because at the time, if somebody got COVID, you had to shut everything down, and so I was officially sent home to be that person. I wasn't overly happy about it, but there we are. And of course, I think prior to that, if I fancied a drink, I'd pick a drink up on the way home from work, and it was all sort of quite relaxed and quite straightforward. And I wasn't driving to and from work, so I ended up bulk ordering wine or drinks to come into the house, and it was only after a few weeks and sort of sitting thinking, and I wanted to use, out of every bad situation you can always find a positive, and I thought, what can I do? So this is a pandemic, hopefully this is never going to happen to me ever again. What can I do so that I come out of this different? And I was eyeing up the boxes of wine coming in and the recycling going out. And I thought, this should be the one. And so I embarked on what was initially just a month's challenge, 28-day. I found a bit of an online, it was called 1 Year No Beer. I found that, and I thought, oh, this sounds like my tribe. I got out on my bike instead of opening a bottle of wine at night, and I absolutely loved it. So when the month ended, I thought I'll go a bit further, and 1 month, 2 months, and then I hit the year, and I don't miss it at all now, at all. It's I think for a while it was always nice to think, come home and put everything down and start to cook tea. Children are a lot older now, and start to cook tea, and I could pour a glass of wine, and it was sort of part of a habit that I had formed. And the habit, I say, was probably the hardest bit. The alcohol was irrelevant; it was the habit.
The behaviour at stage,
and I think so I got on my bike and got out on my bike, and I came back from that and didn't think about it.
I think that's amazing. And I want to ask you've said that what you said to me before about turn a negative into a positive and come out of it differently. How does that make you feel, knowing that you've achieved the unintentional goal? Because it wasn't expected to happen, but because it's been unintentional, how does that make you feel now, where you are, from changing that negative?
I think I feel a completely different person. There was, there had potential to be a while where you sort of thinking, oh, when I get home, I can have a drink. And you sort of get up in the morning, do the day, rinse, repeat.
Yep.
If you're careful, and those that know me well will know that I was pretty good at being the last man standing at any events. And don't get me wrong, I had a fantastic time, and I absolutely loved it, especially when mixing with peers where you weren't in your own community. It was always good fun. But I can still do that now. But then I can go to bed and get up and go for a walk in the morning, and it makes my food choices, makes everything a lot better.
It's created different habits through that.
Yeah. Yes.
And when we spoke before, you talked to me about, it allows you to be more in control of who you need and want to be. And I suppose that comes from being who you need to be as fifth generation Helen, but also who you want to be as Helen, that allows you to be professional, funeral profession Helen. So what benefits has it brought you to your own well-being while being Helen in the industry?
So I'd sort of like to think that Helen the professional is still Helen the professional that I was pre sort of stopping the alcohol. But Helen the person is the bit that has changed the most. I choose to go to the gym. I choose to go for a walk. I choose a little bit better what I like to eat. Not great at that, I have to say, but that's probably the next project. I am more aware of how I'm feeling. I'm sleeping so much better. I think for a long time, especially after my partner died, I thought I needed a drink to get to sleep, but actually it was the opposite. And that was almost my biggest fear when I decided this was going to be my challenge, was will I ever sleep again? And within 2 or 3 days, I was sleeping the best sleep of my life.
Wow.
And that's been a big game changer. But I just feel more in control of my personal life. And I love the freedom that it's given me.
Yeah, I think. And does that help you then?
Hugely.
You just be Helen in all aspects, and it kind of
yes.
intertwines with everything more than anything. But being on that personal journey just allows you to be at your best. Like, that's having huge realizations, unintentional. I love the unintentional part of all this.
Yeah, and I would not have thought that. I thought when I decided that I was not going to order the sort of second, or was it the third box of wine to come through the door, that the best benefit was nothing to do with the alcohol, and more to do with how I feel in myself. I've not correlated those two at all.
Yeah. And that follows your positivity that you've brought. And when we had our conversation before, and we spoke about, if you don't drink alcohol, it automatically you're labelled as you maybe had a problem, and that's not always the case. And especially, focusing on this unintentional journey that you've encountered, that creates more uniqueness to you. And I think it brings, that there is within the industry this unspoken thing, I'll say, when it comes to alcohol, that's maybe not spoken about as much. But have you been affected by anyone that's maybe thought that you've had an issue in the past, or are you strong enough within yourself to let it go over your head?
So I don't know whether, no one sort of said anything to my face. People may have thought that. I don't know. It's been quite interesting. And I suspect I probably would have been this person when out and about, so go on, have a drink, just one, and what have you. And I learned very early on that I suspect from my own behaviour, probably more about the person who wants you to have a drink so that they can, as opposed to wanting you to join them on the journey of the evening, or whatever it is. And it's been quite interesting. I've probably got 3 or 4 very close friends. 3 of them have stopped drinking since I have. and
Wow.
and the other has the occasional drink now, and that's been an unintentional consequence of the whole thing. I don't know. I just I feel so much better, and a little bit more in control of everything as opposed to just work.
Yeah, and your three other friends that you speak about, did they take inspiration from your journey?
Yeah, I suspect a couple of them. Yeah. And I've spoken to all three, and we're like a little tribe, everyone pretty much says the same as me, that they wish they'd done it earlier. And that they didn't realise that it was the alcohol that was causing the need for the alcohol, as opposed, or the want for the alcohol, as opposed to what they perceive to be everything else.
I think that's another good realisation, and I think that's, again, maybe society puts certain perceptions.
Oh, there's huge pressure. Yeah, I've been out and about, and you can pretty much get an alcohol-free beer, gin, in any situation now, and probably wasn't the case pre-COVID, but I think COVID it sent people one way or the other. I think
there was no
the day I've dived into or out of the gin bottle, depending on the circumstances. And I think since then, there's been a big awakening in that field, and so it's not questioned. I don't get any pressure now at all to have a drink, which I did at the beginning.
Yeah, and did you find you were fighting yourself then? You were fighting your mind to stick to your guns on it?
No, not really. I think the sort of 6 o'clock, 6:30 little battle that I had was purely a habit.
Yeah.
And once I'd worked out what I needed to do in that sort of half hour for the first few weeks, and I've not had a problem at all with going out or with joining in and everything and anything that I want to. And it also means that apart from as opposed to being perhaps the person who is the last man standing, I can now, when everybody starts repeating themselves, just leave. They don't notice I've gone, and I get a good night's sleep. So.
I've witnessed both sides of that through the years. Yeah. I've been standing almost to the end with you, and I've seen you've before everyone else, probably sensibly. And it brings on to like the culture and within the industry. The way that I've kind of thought about this is, alcohol at times within the industry is sort of, as you say, like the silent treatment or the habit that becomes very easy. And do you think, it is a way of coping, dealing with stresses and pressures, like you talked about when you said you thought you needed a drink to go to sleep that would help you sleep, that sort of way of things? Do you think in the industry there's still something there with it?
Yeah, I think the role that we provide is very reactive. No one day is the same. We can do the same funeral 5 times a day with the same sort of set of circumstances, but the people and the story behind it makes everything different. And it is a reactive role. So you could go a week without having a call, but then you can get 8 calls in one day, and so I suspect that it's quite easy to get to the end of the day and choose a beer to relax, and that is fine. It's absolutely fine to do that. It's when that pressure and the level of stress in fulfilling everybody's needs. We are naturally givers. We have to be to do the job, it's when you run out of stuff to give that maybe things step in to give you that. And it doesn't have to be alcohol. It could be the gym. It could be chocolate. It could be there's a whole host of things which, when done to excess, are not healthy. You can see how within the profession, if you've not got anything outside of work, this is where these kinds of things creep in as a coping mechanism.
I think it could be very easy, certainly when it comes to stresses and pressures, as you say. You get to your 6:30 time, to quote you, and that's your release almost. And it gives you that kind of false narrative, or you get to 7 o'clock at night and you're having your chocolate or your bag, whatever it is, or you've got to be in front of the telly, you've got to be a couch potato at that sort of time. And it goes part and parcel of how we have to be the caregivers that turn up and give so much care every day. And I loved how you said earlier on, I'm a different person coming out of it rather than the person who went into it. So what would you say would be that you've learned from the previous version of Helen you were to the version of Helen you are? This is just for my benefit, this question.
Well, I've definitely learned that I can't dance, I have to say, but I always thought I could. No, I think, I mean, everybody's story is different, isn't it? I've had an awful lot of stuff thrown at me over the years, and I like to think of myself as pretty resilient person. I think if I reflect back, especially over the last sort of eight years since my partner died, that alcohol did become a little bit of a prop in the early stages after he passed away, and I can now see that for what it was, and this is version whatever number of Helen that we're all getting now. Hopefully you get the one who goes to the gym on a regular basis at some stage.
I would hope so.
A little bit more lettuce. That would be helpful. But it's I have surprised myself with how easy it was to stop, and then also how much better I feel. I was the one who you pour a glass of wine, and then it was always a second glass where my shoulders would drop, and I felt that I was relaxed. The reality is that it was probably yesterday or the previous day's wine that lifted my shoulders in the first place, and actually my shoulders are less stressed than they were. So
I think that's because it does then reflect on how physically you can turn up, and obviously getting to the gym or going out on your bike, if you'd still have been in your habit of every day, you're going out on your bike that you love to do would have been different, or
totally
it would have lasted as long as it has.
Well, I suspect I wouldn't have gone, and it was only because I'd worked out quite quickly that the 6:30 sort of zone was that was a difference. If I poured a drink, I would have two or three. If I could get through that half hour, I didn't want to drink. It's a bit like smokers when they will be a habit around having a cigarette, and it'll be when you get in your car, or when you get to work, or when you get home, or or what have you. And if you change the routine, the habit disappears. And I think unconsciously that's what I did. I didn't consciously do that at that stage. I can now see that's what I was doing, but unconsciously I thought, this is ridiculous. Why am I in this little battle at this time of day? Especially because it was always, especially in COVID, because Boris had appeared at 5 o'clock and told me what rules I'd got to change for the entire company for the next day. It was all a little bit stressful. So
different pressures, even under the pressures that we already are. And as a mum, I spoke to Beck and Charlotte and Hugo. What advice, and again, I suppose myself as next gen, we are technically next generation, people public associate that with us, an advice for behaviours and dealing with stresses and things. What advice could you give us as that next generation to be us personally, to allow us to be who we need to be in the industry?
Yeah, I think it's just to be more mindful of yourself, which I think your generation are. We are sort of very much, brought up Gen X, and we're basically the survivors of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And as parents, we have, I suppose, bred the generation that you're now in based on our experiences. I really like how the younger generation are more mindful of their own mental health. That didn't exist when I was your age. You just put your head down and got on with it, and get on with it we did. But it has spat out, I suspect, quite a lot of people that are my age that have coping mechanisms around the day-to-day stuff that they do. Just to protect your own space, to have something outside of work that you can hang your hat on and say, I really like to sew, to knit, to go to the gym, to play cricket, and it's about community and and the people that you mix with. You choose your friends and your peers wisely. I obviously always gravitated, and that then bred my journey. So I suspect that that's quite important. And then as a woman in this profession, in the very early days, I was the first, just the first, and it's difficult to give 100% to work, which is a vocation, and what we do is, you live and breathe it, and 100% to your family. And so if you're not careful, you just fail everywhere. And I suspect that Beck she won't remember this, but at 8 weeks old, she was under my desk in a bouncy chair whilst I was beavering away at work, because that's how it was. In my case, my circumstances are slightly different because my dad was ill at that time. So it was I had to. So I think it is all about protecting what's important to you, protecting your health, protecting your mental health, and just having fun.
I think that speaks volumes, a lot of volumes to that. And to finish up, I wanted to ask, if I was to say, Helen, I'm thinking about doing a 28-day no alcohol challenge, what would your advice be to me on that? And then if I wanted to continue, and just I'd found cycling, or I really want to run the marathon, but that's in the back of my head right now. What would tips and advice and anything that would help me just motivate me through that?
So I think the 28-day challenge is just try it, do it. What harm can come from it, and you may find that you come out feeling better. It's surprising, I think, where I just got so sleep was a classic one for me. And then there was less bacon cobs and more healthy choices at breakfast time and things like that. So just try it. It's just 28 days as a percentage of your 70 years and 10. It's a very small amount, so it's got to be worth trying. And then online you can find all sorts of support. There's groups everywhere that will give you. You haven't even got to contribute. You can read other people's stories and their journeys, and it gives you the confidence to carry on. And then, having done all of that, the options of if you're a bit younger than me, choosing to do a marathon or to do these things, climb a mountain,
Yeah.
you know, or whatever it is that takes your fancy, you can do it with a clear head and with foresight and planning and what have you. Whereas, you know, if you don't try it, maybe, you know, you'll have a drink on a Sunday, and then you'll have a drink on a Tuesday, and then maybe you'll have a drink on a Thursday, and then it's the weekend, and rinse, repeat. I used to drive past. I lived in the same place for a long time. Every Sunday, the same people were in the pub window playing dominoes for years and years and years. And there's a big wide world out there.
Yeah,
you know, we've all got access to that now. So my advice would be, give it a go.
But yeah, that puts me on the spot to go and do it now for anyone else. You know, and what would you say that, you know, your favourite alcohol-free drink could be? If you were going home tonight or over the weekend, you were going out with the girls, what would you drink alcohol-free?
So I actually I used to drink wine, and that doesn't appeal on any level. I like the alcohol-free beers. There's one Freedom that I like. Keep it in the fridge, and you know, I probably will have every other night. I'll have one of those. Interestingly, I only want one. You know, and as opposed to, you know, there's no pull to keep to going. Alcohol-free gin is always a good one as well. That tastes like gin.
It does.
The wines the wines need a bit of work. I think the fizzy ones are better, but they're quite sugary. So yeah, and yeah, there's lots out there now.
I can vouch for that. And you still wake up tomorrow morning feeling get ready while everybody else is suffering with a hangover.
Yes, I love a good hangover tale there.
Helen, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all of that. First of all, it's been really special to see things from a different angle. But I think personally, you know, I think you've summed it up. You can do anything you put your mind to with a clear head and look after yourself, and it allows you to be who you need to be everywhere else. And, you know, I hope anyone listening back to this conversation or watching our conversation takes that simplicity and, you know, can use it in everyday life that can really help who you need to be in the industry as well. So Helen, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been fantastic.
All right, no, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.